Okay, let's get started. So today this session is going to be on deploying and governing Office 365 groups. My name's Elaine Van Bergen and I'm here from Melbourne, Australia, or the West Island, as I've been told repeatedly over this trip. And I'm going to talk to you about my favourite feature of Office 365. Now, the reason I love Office 365 groups is because it's something that a lot of people end up using without even realising they're actually using Office 365, and it's a great way to get productivity on the stack. So we're going to start with a bit of an overview of what Office 365 groups are. I'm going to show you through some of the features that you might not be aware of and how you can use some of the different bits and pieces. And then we'll dive into some of the more technical aspects, how to control some of those features, how to administer it, how to set it up, and also the APIs, as well as touching on the roadmap at the end. If you do have questions, feel free to ask as we go or ask at the end of the session. That'll be fun. So let's start with an overview. Now, I remember when I started in IT, obviously that was only a couple of years ago, I had a computer and it was under my desk, one of those big things, and I'd sit there and I'd type away with my colleagues and we'd kind of talk to each other in person. And then I'd go to a meeting with a notepad and real paper and write things down, which I kind of sat on my desk and never really used. It's a really different world now. Yesterday, while I was here, I had a meeting, Skype meeting, with a colleague who was in Melbourne and someone else who was in Perth, full screen sharing, and we're all collaborating together on information. And that's the reality of the way a lot of us are doing business now. We're not just talking to people who we're physically connected to in a hierarchy. We're in all these virtual teams where we're actually collaborating across on different scenarios. And we need the tools to be able to do this seamlessly, and this is where Office 365 groups come in. But most importantly, as you go across and you have all these interactions with different teams and people in the organisation, not everyone's going to work in the same way, and you shouldn't have to. So one size doesn't fit all. There's a lot of components of Office 365 groups in the larger stack, and you can pick and choose which pieces fit your needs for a particular scenario. And that really, really helps to be able to work the way you work rather than having to change your work practice to use a specific tool. The main pieces we're going to talk about is how it helps you deal with emailing and scheduling information around with different teams, how we create and share content together as a group, and how we connect people together with that. So now that we've had a bit of an introduction, I'm going to flick over to the demo machine and risk the demo gods. So here we have our Office 365 group, and we're actually looking at this in the online version of Outlook. Now, all this functionality you also get down in Office 2016, but it's a little bit easier for me to demo without you guys seeing all my emails pop up constantly. It's in the online version. You'll see here, this is my group section, so it's appearing just below my inbox, very similar to public folders or those kind of setups if you're used to that. But I have my conversation piece backwards and forwards here where a lot of conversations are going on. One of the features that I really like to use is this like button on the conversation. When you have those team emails going around and everyone's saying, hey, we should have dinner, we should go out for a group dinner on Friday, and you get, yep, let's do it, and 10 of those other single word replies. This eliminates the need for all that kind of thing because you can just hit the like button and that kind of gives it the thumbs up without creating all that email traffic and noise. Equally, I get a lot of emails. I'm talking about hundreds of emails every single day, and I can't physically read and action all of them. So one of the things that Office 365 Groups has added in is the ability to be able to see here an email where I've actually been mentioned in it. Using the @ symbol, I can actually mention colleagues, and then that draws that email trail to that conversation to their attention. And they know that it's not just a generic team conversation, but someone's actually specifically asked them to perform an action on it. And that makes it really, really easy to actually then have that piece. But, conversations are fairly okay via email anyway. So yes, we get some nice new features here. But it's as we move across the rest of the stack, we will really get to see all the different pieces connected together. Now, my background's SharePoint, and I'm really passionate about not having people send me files and asking me to change them and send them back. And I've kind of got used to that work practice of I'll get a file, I'll save it somewhere, I'll put it in my OneDrive, But that's an activity that can take a little bit of training for people to do. Here is a file that has just been forwarded into the group inbox. So someone's just gone, new email, put in the email address of this, and away it's gone, and you can see it here. With just one single click, oh, that's actually gone to... what I can do is I can actually click on it. Sorry, it's just refreshing. I should have hit refresh on it. I can just right-click on that drop-down arrow and say send to group file library. And that will just automatically save it into this files section for that actual specific group. Then it goes straight into there and we can collaborate on it together on the one document without having all these different copies being sent around. So finally I've got that one-click way to get a file from an email into a group storage location and keep it all together. One of the other nice features is typically with groups, when you're having these meetings, you want to set up a shared calendar. And you want it to be a calendar that actually works in terms of being able to see it in Outlook and have it connected with your personal calendar and push appointments into it. And that's what you're actually seeing here. I've actually got my calendar and the group calendar overlaid. And when I go new, I can actually create a meeting for that entire group of people and have that push through, whether that's a recurring meeting or individual meeting, and set that up. And I can also use the scheduling assistant to help me find a time that's suitable for all those different people actually in that particular group. As we move across to the files piece, there's another way to actually enter into groups. So I can go through Outlook and I can click on Office 365 groups there, but you'll also see it here in my OneDrive. Below my personal OneDrive content at the top, I also have this group section down the bottom. And so let's say I've got a particular file that I would like to make sure that a particular Office 365 group can access. Because these groups are actually security principles, I can actually share it with that group by just typing their name into the security area. Obviously I've done that one before, so it's at the top, and then I can just share it with that particular group through that simple activity. So I don't have to move the file, I can just share it throughout the portal, and then as I go across to the group file store, which is over here, you'll see I have both documents that have been directly uploaded that are only of interest to that group, as well as documents that have actually been shared with that group from other locations. So let's see if the demo works. And when we hit refresh, we should now see an additional file appear up there. Doesn't help if you share the same file as previously, obviously. So let's do that again just to prove that it's not completely faked. Share it across. And now we should have another file appearing up in that particular list straight away. So you see I've got a little notification pop up as well. Now the beauty of this is a shared group storage location that's actually keeping all those files together in this particular instance. And so I can navigate through to there straight from my Office 365 group in Outlook. I can hit Files and bang, there's my group files. I can navigate from my group files section straight through to my group conversations, and all that content's linked together. So let's say someone new joins my team 6 months in, all the files they need to access, they're in that single location. They can see all the discussions we've had about them. They've automatically been added to the Office 365 group, and they know about the team meeting that's going to happen on Friday, so I don't have to forward it through to them. You really start to get that connectivity of all those pieces together. However, also because we're going to have meetings, we don't want to be taking notes on bits of paper and kind of passing them round. So one of the other major features we get, as you can see down here, is the shared OneNote. And the primary use of that is actually to share meeting notes and store information and actually share those kind of pieces together. Because you can co-author in Office 365, you can actually have multiple people in the meeting taking live notes and merging them all together as that's actually happening. And then that information is all stored here. This is obviously the web view of OneNote, but works perfectly the same in the client version of OneNote as well, connecting it all together. The newest piece on the block is, of course, Planner. And Office 365 groups also have a plan that you can use and associate with it here. In this instance, I've created a very simple board, and I've just got my columns with actions and a bunch of tasks assigned to different people. So you can see, I've already put together my PowerPoint presentation, and now I think I can probably go in and, well, hey, it's not quite completed, but let's mark it off anyway, and we can actually perform those actions. One of the really great uses of this that I've found is as you have those recurring meetings, put your actions in Planner and then set up that kind of activity where before people come to the meeting, they actually have to action those items, and you can actually have really productive meetings where you're going through decision points rather than, talking to people who've forgotten all the different pieces they're supposed to do. Of course, you get all the different features like charts and all those kind of things as well. So if you're using it to manage a more complex program of work, you can use the reporting features to work out what's assigned to who, how things are progressing over time, and how it's actually connecting together. One of the other new pieces that has just come through is we've actually started to get the ability to actually create a full team site for these Office 365 groups. And along with that comes the ability to create new modern pages. Those of you that have seen SharePoint in the past know there was a fair bit of a training cycle to get people to create content and actually author modern looking pages. But now if you actually click on this pages section through here and click on new site page, you'll actually see it launching the new page dialog where we actually have almost like a Sway-like way of editing pages. And I can, sorry, clicked on the wrong page. Demo. I can flick things around, and then I have these widgets of content that I can actually insert in. So if I wanted to put a document in this particular page just to draw it to attention of people, I can actually pick a piece of content from that group file store, put it in there, and it'll automatically use the online viewer to embed that in the page. I can put any content I like around it, and it's automatically saving the draft as I've actually been typing. So you see here, even if I'd accidentally shut down that page, automatically saved for me. And the other members in the group will see that page as soon as I hit the publish piece. So I'm now getting that ability to be able to highlight content to people, create, visually appealing pieces for them as well. In the demo section, the last piece that I really wanted to show about how, the last two pieces about how groups work, is the other piece we have is the ability to connect it with connectors to external pieces of content. So sometimes there's a need to aggregate content and store it permanently along with that other Office 365 group-based content. And here's actually one I've done where I've set up the Twitter connector to actually look at the MS Ignite New Zealand tag. And I have a bunch of options that I can set up with that particular connector. In this case, I've asked it to put an hourly digest into there of all tweets that are happening that actually got that piece in there. So you'll see each hour I get an aggregated view of all the tweets that are happening about the particular event that I'm part of, and I can actually store this. There is a huge range of connectors that you can actually use to connect through to almost any external data source and store that information as part of your group, if that's a requirement that you need to have. The final one that's very popular as well is often you have a need to be able to collaborate with users outside the organisation. And Office 365 Groups allows you to do that in a secure manner. So in this particular case, I've added my other identity, my Microsoft account. So I've actually sent an invitation to this external Office 365 group to that particular account, and that appears as an email to me over here in my Hotmail account. And as you can see, I've been given the ability to email in and have a conversation as part of that, and I've been given the ability to read the group files as part of that. When I log in, you'll see I get a slightly different look and feel. I have access to the public group and the shared files, but I don't have all those other navigation options of Office 365 across the top because I've only been granted access to this group's content. So I can securely come in, collaborate on this content, and it's automatically stored back with the rest of the group as well. All right, so that's the main features of Office 365 groups. And now we'll flick back to the slides and talk a little bit about how all of that works. So Office 365 has a number of different elements that are part of that group kind of hierarchy. So we get a piece that's Azure Active Directory that controls the identity. We've got Outlook, OneDrive, OneNote, Calendar, Skype. Dynamics CRM also ties in with Office 365 groups now as well, as does Yammer in the future will actually be integrating, and we've got Planner in there as well. The key piece is Azure Active Directory, as that's where that identity store is. So it's actually creating a Azure AD group, and the membership of that is actually being stored in that particular location. Then it actually has a loosely coupled relationship with each of those different services, where the parent Azure AD group identity is pushed through to all those different areas as and when needed. So you'll see that if someone was added to that Office 365 group, they will automatically be granted access to the right elements of the conversation piece, the SharePoint for files, and other different bits and pieces if you're using them. That also flows down onto the Office 16 client, which is where we then start to have a group store, which stores things like your joined groups and your favourite pieces in a separate file, actually from the Outlook client. That allows me to have a certain interaction with it right down from that particular client, and I can actually see some content within those groups even if I'm offline. So let's talk about how we control some of these features. My experience is once people in the business have seen Office 365 groups, they want to use it for everything. And you're going to end up with a lot of these things if you have the default settings turned on. Now that might be something that you want to freely enable. The default setting is to allow everybody in your organisation to create Office 365 groups and then allow them to join other people to those particular groups. Some places that work in a larger environment often like to change those particular settings to provide a bit more governance and control over the top, and that's what we'll talk about, some of the things that enable that. Now, you'll see that Office 365 Groups has been adapting at a rapid rate, so there's a lot of features being added to this, particularly in terms of the administration and management. So we'll talk through in this section what's available today, and then in the roadmap section we'll go through some of the new things that are coming as well. So we actually have the group management experiences. This is available in a number of different pieces in the actual user interface. So you see some of it's in the Office 365 Admin Center, then we have some pieces in Azure AD and some pieces in Exchange. You also have PowerShell over the top of all of that allows you to actually code up a lot of these pieces if you're creating them at large scale. And I'll give you a demonstration to show you where a lot of the different settings live today. Now they're all starting to merge together into the new Azure AD portal to make a lot of this easier to manage, but all the settings are available at the moment. They're just in a few different places that you need to find. One of the other common things that people want to do is set up a naming policy. So particularly if you have somewhere that's a multinational organisation, you don't necessarily want the first person that creates a group called marketing to be able to own the marketing term, and no other team can actually create that. The ability of doing a naming policy allows you to append or suffix the name that they actually put in based with some attributes in Azure Active Directory. So for example, you could use their department as a suffix on that to show actually where they're from, or put their location at the start of it. This will actually very shortly be replaced with the Azure AD policy features that can actually do this particular piece. But right now it's in the Exchange Admin Center to configure it. There is also a blocked words list that you can create as well if you want to stop specific terms from being used for your Office 365 groups. Creation permissions. So as I mentioned earlier, everyone can create groups by default. It's very common that you want to turn that back and actually only have a specific group of people that can create groups. Really easy to command to do this. Basically you go in, create a group in AD, put the members in the group there that you want to be able to create that with, grab the ID of it, and then you can actually create that through. And I'll actually show this very quickly in a demo a little bit later. What then happens is all the ability to create groups is hidden in the UI through all the different clients, but if they do navigate directly to that URL, they'll get that pop-up that you can see up there basically telling them that they can't create a group. Also got a new feature coming through that allows us to provide usage guidelines and data classifications to be able to control the behaviour and give people a warning about what that sort of group is. Particularly as you start to have a lot of different groups, you might want to tag the ones which are internal use versus external use. So people know that if they put content in here, it's not something that people outside the organisation are going to see versus the other external use groups. Equally, that usage guideline, that's to provide a URL to a policy to give people more information about what's going on in that group and how they should use it. You can also create hidden membership as well. So that actually hides the group and provides the capability that people can't actually see what's happening in that particular group. We also have the ability to give some security and compliance features, controlling what people can do from a mobile point of view. So Office 365 Groups is also available as a mobile app. And that's how a lot of people interact with it when they're actually on the road. And the mobile application management will allow you to control whether or not they can actually interact in that manner and what they can do at a high level as well. We've also provided the ability to convert the privacy of the group. So when you create a group, it's private or public by default, depending on which one you select, and then you can go back in later and actually convert that over to private if you discover there's more information going in there and you need to change it. As you saw in the demonstration, it was super easy to access group content externally, but that might not be something you want to enable in your organisation. Or you might want to enable it to be able to happen, but certain groups you want to lock it down and make sure that those specific groups cannot be shared outside the organisation because they have sensitive information that's particularly important to keep in there. And that's where the guest controls come in. You have the ability to turn off all guest access. You can go in and you can specifically add guests to groups individually, and you can actually allow whether people can access group resources as well. So you can go in and turn all that off if you don't want to actually enable that capability. So let's have a look at some of that. All right, so one of the things you might have noticed earlier is you can start to see up here some of the different features about these different groups. So public group with guests. Because I've actually enabled someone outside the organisation to join in a guest capacity, it's telling me right there what's actually happening in that particular event. This one down here, public group, super secret. I've used that organisational control capability to apply a tag to it to be able to tell people when they join there that it's actually a secret group. Whereas this one, I've actually provided no extra control over the top of that particular piece. And what now happens is let's say I've decided this external group, we want to be able to change it. And we actually want to apply one of the usage categorizations that I've set up. You'll see down here in the edit group page, I'm actually getting the usage guidelines, which is a URL that I've configured, and I'm actually getting the ability to select between the different classifications that I've personally set up. Obviously, these are not default classifications. You get to choose which particular ones you want to put into the system. All right, but let's dive into the admin centres. So the first place to look is under Office 365, the main admin centre, settings, services and add-ins. And if you scroll down on here, you'll see that you have the Office 365 groups section. This is, let's just log back in. This is where we have the ability to control very high-level settings around changing whether or not we can allow external people to access this at all. And basically it gives me that capability, where if we go down here, settings, services and add-ins, and we go back down to our groups. All right, so if I want to turn off the capability of people being able to share group resources outside the organisation, that's where I turn it off. Equally, if I want to allow that to happen, but not let group owners do that. So have it something that an administrator actually has to do from a point of view. I can turn that off as well, and that provides that capability. As you can see, this only takes effect from the time that I turn this setting across. So if people already have access outside the organisation, it doesn't actually go through and remove their access, it just stops it from being done in the future. So you've still got an admin task to go and clean that up if you do want to remove everybody with admin access.
So those people that you're sharing with do not have to have a Microsoft account? It could be a Gmail account or whatever?
If you send an external, and so the question was, do people need a Microsoft account? So if I send that invite to a Gmail account, let's say, it will actually ask them to sign up with a Microsoft account to actually authenticate into that system via authenticated access, unless you're doing the anonymous link sharing for an individual file. So it does actually require an account. If they already have an Office 365 account through their organisation, obviously that'll work as well. Yep. One of the other main areas is under groups. You can see here under groups, I have the ability to filter to all the different groups, and I can pick Office 365 group, and that will actually cut down that list, so I only see the Office 365 groups that I've created. And then I can click on it over here and go through and perform some of the basic activities. So I can edit the name of the group. I can change it from public to private. I can add members. I can delete the whole group as well. And if I actually, so yeah, here's where if I wanted to change, I can change whether it sends copies. And if I want to turn off some of the email noise, and I can set up and change the owners as well. So this is where I would go in if someone was leaving who was an owner of a group, I could grant someone else ownership of that particular artefact. As I mentioned earlier, all this is scriptable as well, so at scale you're going to script it all up, but often if you've got a small task to do, it's very easy to do through this user interface. Next piece is across in the Exchange Admin Centre. So under Exchange Admin on the dashboard, if I click on Groups, this is where I set up my naming policy. Right here, configure group naming policy, and this will actually go through and give me those abilities to set up a group naming policy to append or add characters at the front based on the user who created the group. As mentioned earlier, that'll actually be moving shortly, but that's the current way to do that as well. And then I also have the pieces over in Azure Active Directory. So this is the old Azure portal, which is where you scroll down to the bottom and you've got the Directory tab. Then I can go across to my directory under Configure. I have a section of the main settings for Office 365 groups under the Group Management section. So I can turn off some of the capabilities about whether users can create it through here as well, through the user interface. And similarly to what I had in the O365 portal, I can delete groups from here, I can change the name of groups, change the membership of groups as well. Very recently, this has now also been added to the new Azure portal. So this is actually in preview, this kind of piece here, where you can see as well, I can see the Office 365 groups, and I can change a lot of the features in here as well. There are still a few differences as it's in preview. So one of the favourite things I think is really powerful with these Office 365 groups is with Azure AD Premium, I can actually turn on a setting called Dynamic Membership. What Dynamic Membership allows me to do is set up an actual property and then have it automatically put members into the group. So this is obviously a relatively silly one to do. Display name starts with A. But in a real world, you might set that up to be everyone with the Department of Marketing. Or, however you're going to actually set up that ownership. And what it will actually do is usually it's going to take a little while before it refreshes. Then it will actually use that mapping and put the members into the group for me. So if someone new joins the team, as soon as they're synced up to Azure AD with Azure AD Connect, and it picks up that their property matches the rule I've set, they go into that Office 365 group and automatically get access to everything that's needed. There you go, that's set up pretty quickly, as you can see. I've only got 100 or so users in my Active Directory, so it's not huge, but it's very, very responsive. If you're using that feature at this point in time, you're better off doing it in the old portal because the new portal doesn't quite have the user interface to do that. Equally, I mentioned some PowerShell capabilities. So I'm going to do a very quick demo of a couple of the PowerShell pieces. To do this, I'm going to use the new Azure AD directory pieces, and you want to download this particular preview version. The general availability version doesn't actually have all the pieces for Office 365 groups in there yet. So if we want to do the most common task, which is connect to Azure AD, typically you're going to get your credential pop-up. This is usually good for an interactive login. Obviously, if you were running it unattended, you could encrypt the credentials in a different manner. I'll store my credentials. I am then going to connect to the service, which is very simple. And we'll hope I've typed my credentials correctly. And then we'll have a look at some of the settings. So this particular command just lists out all the different templates that are set up. So there are a number of different templates that sit in Azure AD. The one that I actually want is called group.unified. So what you're going to do is you're going to list this command, pick out this lovely object ID for it, and then that's going to allow you to perform actions and set the settings on it. You can see here that I've already done that. So if I then do a get command, and I'm just going to expand the properties on that particular template so you can actually see that. Let's just scroll that down a little bit. So you can see here on this template property, these are actual pieces that I can actually go through and set. So I can allow guests to be a group owner, or I can turn that on or off. This is where I set up the URL of the policy that people are going to click through, and I allow people to create things or not, and also where I set up the classification list. So very quickly, if I wanted to do that, I will just now store that template into a variable so I can perform some settings on it. I will then set each of those properties. So I need to set up a settings object. Settings object. And then I just go through and set each of those properties to whatever I want. So this here is the actual unique identifier of the group that I put members into that I want to allow group creation to happen through. And you just go into the Azure AD portal and grab the GUID of it and then paste it into your actual code. I'm just putting a URL to my blog for the usage guideline list, and you can see the classification list that I used there. So if I go through, create all those settings, and then the last step of all of that is basically to actually apply those settings through the new object. Basically what will happen as well is if you've already done this, which you can see there, so I didn't delete my settings previously, so it's telling me I've already got settings set up there, which I can actually look up with the get command. And you can see it's telling me I've already got some settings applied to group.unified, which is going to conflict with what I was actually trying to do there. So if I did want to get rid of those settings, I just grab its object ID, throw that into the remove settings command, which will then get rid of those particular settings that were applied, and then it should let me apply my settings just fine after that. So now it'll apply those, and you'll see that I get a different object ID back for my newly set of settings. So that's how I'd go through and actually change those classifications if I wanted to have them set up, provide a different URL to usage policies, and all the different bits and pieces that you can do through there. On top of that, I can then connect on into Exchange if I want to do that as well, and I can actually perform a lot of actions around creating the groups and doing other bits and pieces from that point on. All right, but let's talk about some of the other ways you control these groups. So there's full information protection across a lot of these. As you can see, there's a couple of pieces that are marked as not yet, but a lot of the things around e-discovery are all available. So, you know, anything that's stored in here, if I actually need to put it on hold because there's some kind of litigation going on, I can use the policies of Office 365, not only just on the mailbox, but also on the group site to keep all that content locked together while that's actually happening. I also have a lot of auditing across the top of this. So you start to see all the auditing events, and I can actually get into that from PowerShell as well with the Get Unified Group PowerShell command. Now, because some of those pieces are rolling out, you might find some of the newer commands, like the Azure AD commands that I ran before. If your tenancy is not on first release, you'll actually receive an error with some of those commands telling you they're not available yet, but they're actually rolling out at the moment, so that they'll be there soon if they're not there already. And then you have a whole bunch of reporting as well. So once you have these Office 365 groups up and created, you're going to want to keep an eye on them and see who's loading a lot of content into what group, which groups are being used, and which ones are kind of sitting there and not being used a lot at all. One of the other most common settings that people will perform as well is to actually put a quota on that group site. And so that's the actual command there to do that. And what that allows you to do is actually reduce the amount of storage that's available for that Office 365 group to the specified gigabyte amount that you enter into there. So getting this stuff set up. Now, obviously, if you're in Office 365 and you have all your email there and everyone's got a license to, the Exchange capabilities and the SharePoint capabilities, you're done. But most of the customers that I work with actually have or want to have some kind of hybrid Exchange set up. And you can actually use Office 365 groups even without all the mailboxes being in the cloud. So that's a really powerful feature for while you're doing that kind of migration, or if you're permanently going to be in hybrid for a specific business need. The groups will be created and managed in Azure Active Directory. And then you have the ability through Azure AD Connect to enable those groups to synchronize down onto your on-premises Active Directory. They're actually appended with a particular GUID, so you can actually see where they sit in there. And you can have that pushed through into your Exchange environment as well. There are some specific requirements, and there's an article with a hyperlink to all the details on this. Azure AD Connect, you need to enable write-back in that, obviously, to be able to perform that feature, and that'll push those groups across. But you also need to be on Exchange 2013 CU11 or Exchange 2016 CU1 to be able to do that. So older versions of Exchange, while they will hybrid with Office 365, they won't allow that write-back feature of groups to actually push back, and you'll have limited capability down for those people that don't have a mailbox. Basically, what that looks like is then you can still see groups. And you can just interact with it, very similar to how you would with a distribution list. You can still send an email to the address, which requires the group write-back feature to be able to have that automatically appear. And as long as I've got a license to the SharePoint part of Office 365, I can still just click on through to all the group files as well and access them. They'll appear as distribution lists in a contact list. So one of the features you won't get, however, is the left-hand navigation. So that piece is actually circled there. In my Outlook Rich client, I will actually see that listing if my mailbox is in the cloud. But if I'm in a hybrid situation and my mailbox is not, I won't actually see that group listing feature. So I'll only interact with it through an email kind of capability. You can also migrate distribution lists across to these fully featured Office 365 groups. At the moment, there's very specific requirements on which distribution lists you can migrate with the scripts, and there are also third-party tools that allow additional, more complex migrations. So what you'll see here is basically it will migrate if it was created in the cloud, not nested, and quite a simple setup there. Any of the more complex ones, that's where you're looking at a third-party tool to push it across. They are working on a lot of those features, and the roadmap for Office 365 groups has been moving very, very fast. So we are expecting some of the more nested groups and created in different locations to be pushed across for migration capability. Also on top of all of this is a whole bunch of APIs, not just the PowerShell commands, which I showed you from an administration point of view, but if you want to code this stuff and have this information from Office 365 groups appear in your applications, you actually have an API that can do that. So what that means is, if I'm writing some on-premises system, let's say I've got an intranet that sits on an on-prem system, and I actually want to pull some information out of an Office 365 group conversation and put it on a page, I can absolutely do that. I can actually access the full parts of the Office 365 groups all through one API. So that's the Graph API that I'm going to be able to hit to do all of that, and I can actually link on through. At the moment, there's two versions of the Graph API. There's the fully available, generally available V1 version, and then there's the beta version. And what you'll see is there is some difference in functionality. So some of the newer features that are being pushed out, they're only available in the beta endpoint, and then they migrate through to the generally available endpoint over time. And definitely want to make sure if you're looking at coding, you look at the Microsoft Graph, which if you go to graph.microsoft.io, you'll get more information on, rather than the older AAD Graph. All the new features are going to go into this particular one here. So let's finish off with talking a little bit about the roadmap. Every time I do a presentation on Office 365 groups, there's something different. Which is really exciting, because if you've got Office 365, you own this, and you're just getting new features added without any additional licensing. It's providing more capability. You can see a summary of this up here. So if you look at what was shipped during the past year, that is a huge amount of information. In fact, I think this is probably the fastest moving piece of Office 365. I've never seen anything have so many major features added in such a short period of time. And it's really stable as well. You know, even though there's a lot of new things going in here, it's being well tested at a huge scale. But the list of things that are coming very, very soon is equally as long as what's actually been already created. So we'll talk through some of the bigger ones of these. So one of the most common things that people next request is, I've got a lot of Office 365 groups. People have created them. They thought they were going to be really, really great. They thought a lot of people wanted to talk about the rugby or whatever feature it was, but then you discovered there was a lot of Australians in the company and they didn't really interact in the same way, so we needed to get rid of that content. The expiry and soft delete will allow some of this to automatically happen. So what it can do is it can detect when a group hasn't been used for a period of time, and it will actually send the group owner an email saying, do you still need this group to be here? And if they don't actually perform that action, you'll then have it soft deleted. And that can actually be restored by the administrator, but what that actually does, it allows you to drop off those Office 365 groups that were just useful for a period of time and no longer in use. Equally, at the moment, you have to add in all the banned words yourself if you want to actually use the banned word list. Microsoft's actually going to provide one for us that will block all the common words and allow us to extend on that. It will also make the naming policy a little bit easier for us to go through and do through AD policies. There'll also be the information protection based on location. So you can see here I can set a particular location, and then I'll be able to apply that to Office 365 groups to perform specific activities. If I need to control it, perhaps if I'm accessing features from a specific country, I shouldn't be able to access certain Office 365 groups due to specific legal requirements of that particular location. Also, Yammer is going to be rolled in to allow Office 365 groups as well. Now, this is a really exciting feature because a lot of people are already using Yammer, but previously the files and some of the other capabilities like calendars weren't really integrated with the rest of the Office 365 stack. It was great for people that were using Yammer, but not integrated with the other pieces. What this will actually allow us to do is to turn over from that conversations piece and actually use Yammer for the conversations if you choose to do that for a specific group. That will also really help that scenario where you might not have some people with Exchange licenses. You know, they may be accessing Yammer for conversations and they want to use the Yammer app to do that particular piece as well. So now we can pick and choose which conversation piece suits our needs best and change that round on a group by group basis. Also, we'll get that full team site for a modern group. So the new pages will come through and actually allow, instead of just one single document library, we can create the full pages and actually have very visually appealing, rich experiences, create team news and a lot of the other common features that you want to use within that capability. Also, all the Outlook endpoints will be actually integrated in. You've seen some screenshots already of how it works with Office 2016, but some of the other Outlook clients actually don't have full group integration with them yet. You just interact like with an email address, and that will actually push on through to all the different mobile clients to actually make that fully featured. So that's some of the biggest parts of the stack that are coming. As you can see, there's quite a lot of change happening in that area. And we've also talked through a heap of different areas. So a lot of the major pieces here are actually hyperlinks in this slide, where you can go through and find some more information. So if you're setting up a hybrid, the first link is the one that you want. If you want a summary of all the different pieces that we've talked about, have a look at the general update link, and that will actually link you through to articles on all the different things about Office 365 groups. Also, the roadmap will show you all the different things that are coming as well. So that's all the slides that I had to show. Definitely like you to do your evaluation to make sure you get in the draw. And if anyone's got any questions, happy to answer them now.
SharePoint team sites, when will they, within groups, have the ability for content types metadata? Or do they already have?
So you want to be able to, do you want to be able to create full content types and perform versioning of those kind of activities on the the group?
Management, retention,
Yep.
all those things like we normally do in a SharePoint team site. Groups
Yep.
get that capability.
Yeah, so as you can see, Groups is now moving towards fully featured team sites. You get a lot more capability in terms of those document management features. Completely separate discussion, but there are some usability concerns about when you start to create a lot of content types, because remember the way I interacted with things, I'm just going to drag files onto my browser. I'm probably not, as a lazy end user, going to start to fill in all that metadata. So yeah, you do have to think carefully about what the specific use of that content type is. But yeah, you start to get a lot more capability, and you'll be able to add groups to team sites as well if you need that. Yep.
Any details on Microsoft Teams, Skype Teams, or whatever it was called?
Any details on Microsoft Teams? I believe there's a big announcement from Microsoft next week about some new things in Office. But yeah, I don't think we can say anything more about that.
Is there a migration path from shared boxes?
Yeah, migration path from shared mailboxes across. Distribution lists, there's the migration path, but not from a mailbox that I'm aware of. There's probably third-party tools that are going to perform that capability for you, but natively there's not a script that's provided to perform that at the current time. Was there another? All right, so I know it's lunchtime, so I'll let you all go, and if anyone has any other questions, feel free to come back afterwards.